Please be sure to donate to my Patreon to help support the channel. Link in the description down below.
It's showtime.
Hey guys, Django Fett here, hunting down games, comics, TV shows, movies, and more, and this is a review for Star Wars Omnibus, Quinlan Vos Jedi and Darkness. Now, determined from the title, you would think that all of the stories are about Quinlan Vos, but you're actually wrong about that. It's actually 75% of the stories are actually centered around Quinlan Vos, and the rest are different. The galaxy was a dangerous place for a defender of the Republic. Even before the start of the Clone Wars, for Jedi Knight Quinlan Vos, a mind-wiped amnesiac, a slave to the witches of Dathomir, and a spy for the Republic, the greatest peril came from darkness, anger, and doubt in his own heart. Along with the early adventures of Quinlan Vos and his fellow Jedi, Aayla Secura, who went on to appear in both Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. So I wanted to review this book before Menace Revealed because it actually has more pre-Episode 2 stories that are of more value and importance than Menace Revealed. So I'll get to that one a little bit later after this book. So we have 6 stories in this book: Twilight, Infinity's End, Darkness, the Stark Hyperspace War, I can never pronounce this, the Devornian version, and Rite of Passage. So starting off with Twilight, this is collected with issues number 19 through 22 for the Republic comics. Takes place 31 years before the Battle of Yavin and 1 year after Episode 1. Written by John Ostrander and drawn by Jan Duursema. When Vos wakes up, he finds himself in a sea of fire, chased by bounty hunters, rescued by a Devornian named Vilmar Grok, aka Villy, and his memory wiped away, not knowing where he is and what he's doing in Nar Shaddaa. He has lost all of his memory, and this is his journey from the fire in the building to what he's doing now. Now Vos and Villy undergo a journey to piece together Vos's past and also find his Padawan Aayla Secura, who also is an amnesiac too. This is one of our first introductions into Vos, who is just this brazen Jedi who's on the edge of light and dark, trying to piece together his memory. Plus, it also helps. He can read memories by touching any items he comes in contact with using the Force. Now, Vos is very headstrong, but a really cool lead who is very powerful and later on becomes a spy for the Jedi to infiltrate Dooku and the Confederacy and the Clone Wars. And then Villy is this cunning yet funny scoundrel who really fits as this dual lead, helping Vos but also fighting him for his own gain, yet doing it all to help Vos in Villy's own twisted way. Now, if this is your first time reading a John Ostrander and Jan Duursema story, you will find out these stories are very exposition heavy and very dialogue heavy. Take it for a good or bad thing, but I feel it really works for the context of these situations. In this case, Vos slowly finding out his past by going to point A, to B, to C, and piecing out his memory. And at the end, we find Vos a very conflicted character, and he doesn't fully grasp the whole situation and submits himself to the Jedi in the end. The next story is Infinity's End. This is Republic number 23 to 26, which takes place 3 months after the events in Twilight, written by Pat Mills and drawn by Raymond Bucks. Vos is sent to Dathomir to uncover a disturbance by the Dathomiri witches who are trying to destroy Coruscant. It's an okay story with okay artwork. I just found it completely forgettable compared to the other Vos and other stories out there. Then we have the next story, which is Darkness. This takes place in Republic number 32 to 35, set 2 years after Episode 1, written by John Ostrander and drawn by Jan Duursema once again. As Vos is uncovering more of his memories, he runs into his former master, Thome, who reminds me of this like almost Clint Eastwood, Scott Glenn hybrid Jedi Master in a way. I don't know, just based off his look and the way he acts, it just seems like it. To destroy an ancient Anzati Dark Jedi who has converted Vos's former Padawan, Aayla Secura, to the dark side. Now the story is about Vos uncovering his past and conquering the demons of his past and become this great Jedi and save Aayla. I really enjoy this story a lot, as it really shows you a whole new Vos and make you just like and appreciate him as a character. I'll never understand why he doesn't just get more appreciation in the EU, as he is super underrated. Now, there was one moment I thought was cliche and it's kind of like been there, done that, but that's really it about the story. The next story is Stark Hyperspace War. This is a story within a story, and it takes place in Republic's number 36 to 39, set right after Darkness, but with Plo Koon and others relaying the events of a war that happened 12 years before Episode 1. Written by John Ostrander and drawn by David Fabry. So the story has an interesting backstory because it was first mentioned in the Episode 1 Phantom Menace movie scrapbook, which I do have, where Plo Koon was described as a veteran of the Hyperspace Wars. And I remember reading that and I was really puzzled by that because the only story, the only Hyperspace War that was mentioned at the time was the Great Hyperspace War, which was 5,000 years ago. But due to Plo Koon being fairly young and aging like almost like humans almost, the Stark Hyperspace War was developed to fix this issue. Based on a freaking scrapbook, which probably has no meaning, they did a whole new story based on that. That says something about their dedication right there. Now, this war was fought because the Republic wanted to establish peace terms with a force called the Stark Commerce Combine. The peace negotiation failed as Stark flipped the terms and controlled hyperspace lanes and had a bigger force. Not only would the Jedi, but the insane Ranulph Tarkin with his forces would fall into this trap. Tarkin is actually, the relationship was rather vague as it's not certain that he is the father or uncle of Moff Tarkin, and definitely shares the same traits as him, as he is arrogant and stubborn, but he's supposedly the uncle of Tarkin, though it's not really confirmed. And in the end, the Jedi would be triumphant. Featured a heavy show of Jedi characters, but this was Plo Koon's story. He stood out front and center and excelled as a Jedi Master, and even praised at the end, as we have the audience feel he deserves the credit. Other than the great story, the artwork was also great. The battle scenes are really colorful. After this story in particular, I just love Plo Koon. I think he's one of my favorite Jedi, I would say. I would probably say he's my top 5 in my top 5 list for sure. I don't even know what my top 5 list is, but he's definitely up there for me. I've always had a fond appreciation of Plo Koon because of his look and the way he acts in these stories. And this is truly the biggest standout story of this omnibus by far. Moving on, we have the Devorian version. I'm butchering that name, I don't even know how to pronounce it. In Republic number 40 to 41, written by John Ostrander and drawn by David Fabry once again. And the story is centered around Vilmar Grok, relaying the events of the Jedi Council Acts of War story based on his own skewed point of view to some shady characters. Now basically this story is greatly exaggerated but extremely funny. I mean, one of my favorite moments is when Villy steals a Jedi artifact and afterwards offers the Jedi to steal the artifact for a reward, and some of the Jedi are portrayed as complete dummies, and Yoda being this Gollum saying, "Treasure, my precious," and acting like a freaking rabid dog. This honestly felt like a Tag and Bing story, which is great because I love those stories. And you would think the art would be like the previous story, Stark Hyperspace War, because it has the same artist, but it's really not. It's much more subdued and it has a different colorist involved, but it does work very well for Villy's own story. This is just an all-around great, funny side story, unrelated to Vos, and only towards the end where he is just portrayed as this dummy that Villy just shoots. And the last story is Rites of Passage, contained with Republic number 42 to 45, is another John Ostrander and Jan Duursema story. Now the year this takes place is incorrect in the omnibus, saying it's 30 years before the Battle of Yavin, but according to Wikipedia, it is actually 28 years before the Battle of Yavin, and a year after Darkness, so Darkness should be 29 years before Battle of Yavin. They thought they got the timing right and put the stories properly, but they really didn't. They did put the stories in properly, in order, but they got the years wrong, basically. And to make it more confusing, the story takes place within a flashback in the beginning with what happened 46 years before Battle of Yavin, or 14 years before Episode 1, in which Vos saves a baby Yala Secura from death and recruits her to become a Jedi. So lots of revolving timelines. Now the flashback is very brief and happens in the beginning, which is 4 years after Episode 1. I like to base it off the nearest movies for me, just the years and stuff like that, so that's how I like to do it, if you happen to notice. After Thrawn fails to protect the cousin of Yala Sakura by 2 Morgokai assassins and becomes a prisoner himself, Sakura and Vos go to the planet to free both prisoners. And this is our first glimpse of Yala and Vos tearing it up and kicking ass, and it's really satisfying. Now I will say it's pretty cliche, this story, but it does have a good setup with Dooku, the Exiled Twilight, and the Morgokai for the Clone Wars Dark Horse stories, which are really incredible stuff. Clone Wars Dark Horse is the best Clone Wars by far, in my opinion. Everything else is not on the same level at all. But one of my first reviews on my channel was reviewing these omnibus books, the Clone Wars omnibus books. So if I find them, I'll put links in the description, but those are really dated videos, very dated content. But if you want to check out my thoughts, I'll put links in the description down below. So what are my overall thoughts of this omnibus? I thought it was great all around, with no bad stories in this book at all, which is a shocker. There is one that is okay, not that great, but the rest are just really engaging and good stuff. I was not bored one bit. So my final rating for Quinlan Vos Jedi in Darkness Omnibus is... While I recognize it's not perfect, it's still satisfying, and 90% of the stories are just all around good, if not great. So let's see how much the omnibus sells for on eBay and Amazon. Prices radically vary each day, but these are the prices on the day of this review. So on Amazon, it is selling for $70, which is insanity for physical, and Kindle for $20. But wait till we get the eBay one, because it is selling for $50 to $100. So honestly, I gotta say, you're better off getting this online, just downloading the torrent or whatever it is. But as long as you support this in some way, read this story, you get into it, that's all that really matters. So one more omnibus review to go, and that is The Menace Revealed. This is the last one for the Rise of the Empire era, and I will have that finished by the end of this year. So if you guys can check out my previous reviews for Rise of the Sith and Emissaries and Assassins Omnibus, I would really appreciate it. Don't forget to please like this video, comment down below, subscribe to my channel Django Fett, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Peace.